want you to meet a gentleman that we've known for a while. You probably know him digitally on Twitter and as a blogger for RoundTable. It's Marty Shindler. Marty, thank you for letting us steal some time from your busy schedule.
Well, it's a pleasure to do it, John. I'm fond of you and art and the work that you guys are doing, and it's a pleasure. I'm honored that you asked me.
We caught you in between sessions at Digital Hollywood, and this is my first time at Digital Hollywood.
And it won't be the last.
I hope not. It's fascinating. I've always felt, and now it's confirmed, that this conference is really more high-end future. This is really the business of media as opposed to, let's say, NAB or SIGGRAPH, which are very product-oriented shows.
Yeah, those two are, which I attend regularly. NAB and SIGGRAPH and CES are all focused on consumer products, on professional products, on technical papers that are involved in the various technologies, the electronics, the computer graphics, broadcasting technology. Digital Hollywood is more about thinking ahead, bringing together groups of people on various topics to think, what's the future going to be? Where is this particular business today? Where is this particular business going to be tomorrow? And I've reflected that on the two panels that I'm involved in. The first one that was just finished a little while ago was called The Future of Film. Wall Street analysts meet industry executives looking to the future.
You had some great people on that panel. Tell us who they were.
Well, they were a really good group of people. I'll do it from my immediate left when you see the footage. Michael Pachter is a senior director. That may not be his official title with Wedbush Securities. Probably has been on more of my panels than any other one person. He has a wide breadth of knowledge. He is very articulate, not afraid to say when he knows something, and certainly not afraid to say something when he doesn't know something. I'm really glad that he was able to be there. To his left was Larry Namer, great credentials, founder of E-Entertainment at a time when we were going from broadcast to what was then called narrowcast. You know, ABC, there were three networks at one time. You and I are old enough to remember that. And he had the idea for E-Entertainment because cable was able to get his product out there. It didn't need to be over the air. And he ran that for a number of years, sold it, did some really interesting things. Now he's doing content in China and throughout Southeast Asia. Very fascinating guy, brings a whole dimension to the world of TV and content, because you can't be in a nutshell today and think only the U.S. and North America. You know, certainly some content doesn't travel elsewhere, some content does travel elsewhere. So, and you got to be thinking about China, particularly from the movie point of view. To his left was Gene Munster, probably the world's foremost expert on Apple. He spent many years with Piper Jaffray, has his own VC firm now with a few of his former Piper Jaffray associates. But when it comes to Apple, even Michael Pachter today acknowledged how much Gene knows about Apple. When they come out with a new product, when there's an earnings announcement, he's everywhere. And he's very good at it, but he knows so many other things too. And he's been a great addition to the panel. He's done this 3 or 4 times. Next to him was Justin Liu, who's an executive with Akamai, been around a couple of the panels. Akamai, because of their technology, because of how important broadband is today, and more importantly, how broadband is going to be tomorrow, getting signals from here to there and across the ocean or wherever it's going, they're a fundamental part. You can't really have a future of TV discussion without thinking about how broadband and future technologies impact that. And last but not least on the panel was Darren Cross. Who's an executive. He's got a legal background. Most recently spent some time in business development for Maker Studios, currently owned by Disney Company. where making short-form content was their mantra, and having YouTube channels with stars. So he brought a good dimension to that as well.
Really a bunch of smart guys, and you kept them in check, kept them talking to each other, really brought out a lot of great information about where the media is going, and that's what I found fascinating. These are guys who know what's happening now, know what's on the horizon, and they were able to share it under your guidance.
Well, the goal is to have a panel discussion. I've sat in the back of the room bored to tears so many times when a moderator gets up and says, John, question number one, and then Art, what's your answer to question number one? And Charlie, what's your answer to question number one? And we're out of time, and gee, no time for questions from the audience and that. And I've been bored to tears, and I've been bored to tears with people getting up and doing 5 people on the panel doing 5 10-minute boring PowerPoints. So I've tried to do what we call a panel discussion, or more importantly, a discussion amongst the panelists. So I know what the broad topic is, I know what each person's expertise is. The goal is to kind of bring that out, ask questions that they might have, 2 or more people might be in agreement, but for different reasons, and I get them to state what those reasons are. And there's often someone who says, you know what, John, I don't agree with you respectfully for the following reasons. And then I will interject along the way to keep the conversation going. So it works okay, and the audiences are actually very receptive to it.
Great information, very impressed. I'm looking forward to your next panel after lunch. That'll be great too. But I wanted to ask you about your appearances at events like this, like NAB and even SIGGRAPH, but mostly places like NAB, because there you did panels as well. What is the purpose for you as I'll call you a major player, you may not call yourself that, but somebody who is a consultant to major companies in Hollywood and around?
Well, we work at many points on the horizontal value chain within Hollywood, within entertainment and entertainment technology, but also many of the verticals, the companies and products and services that are important to the vertical. The vertical, let's say very simply stated, going from development to different forms of distribution. But there's a lot of products and services that tie into that. And our work is understanding how they all tie together, what is adjacent to any point on that value chain, higher or lower, left or right, because they all impact those businesses. And the people that we work with on various business matters are very knowledgeable about what they're doing. They're very creative people, they're very technology-focused people, but they often need that business perspective. Sometimes what they need is someone to say to them what they need to hear, even if it's not always what they want to hear. And we've done that, and we've done that diplomatically. I'm a guy with both an MBA and a CPA in my background. My wife is my business partner. She's got an MBA from a top 5 business school. She has a master's degree from Sloan at MIT.
She's not just a figurehead in this business.
No, not at all. And when we are together, and we are a team. Right. We've been together as a couple, a married couple, for a very long time. The goal is to help and advise those companies. The word consultant gets overused sometimes, because I've seen people, and in the early years of doing this, and I've been at it for about 22 years independently consulting, and was previously with the Coopers of PricewaterhouseCoopers. But what happens is, oh, consultant, oh, that means you're looking for a job. No, we're here, we do advisory services is really a better term for that. But we go to those conferences because we've got to know what people are doing, what are the products that are being shown, which are the products that are being sold, which are the ones that are being bought. And we also tend to do something that a client of ours many years ago, and a guy named Alvin Toffler, wrote the book Future Shock, foremost futurist in the world. He passed away a couple of years ago, but he's one of those key people that had a significant impact on my thought process. But one of the things he told me is when you go to these trade shows like an NAB or a CES, you got to go around to the fringes. If you go to CES, you're going to see a monster-sized booth from LG, from Samsung, from Qualcomm, from a whole bunch of other big brands. And they have a lot of good information. They have a lot of good products and services that they're showing, and you can't miss those. But along the fringes are a lot of people and companies who are early stage companies. Some of them are startups. They are some of those who have that next idea. Some of them, in order to get that, it's not just an idea that counts, John. An idea is good, but it only takes you so far if you don't have the team together, if you don't have a plan for your business together. And that's a phrase that I use regularly. A lot of people say, no, I've got a business plan. And I'll say to them, well, that's good, but I've read it, and it's just a bunch of jargon. And a bunch of pieces of paper without strategies and tactics built into it for how are you really going to have your plan for your business is different from a business plan. It may sound like semantics, but the two are very different. And those who really have a good plan for their business, something that maybe someone like Marty and Roberta Shindler, who can ask questions, maybe not say yes sir, whatever you say sir, sometimes, can help them get that plan pulled together in a better way.
So that's what impressed me, I think, about one of the first time I met you, is your depth of knowledge. Now, of course, you're a business background, but having seen you at, again, SIGGRAPH was the most recent one, so that's in my mind, going into the weeds, going around the fringes, you really have a great depth of knowledge. How do you use that with your clients? Because, again, I think of you as a businessman, as a business consultant.
Well, you've got to know what your clients are doing for their product or service if you're really going to help them. Otherwise, it's just like a bunch of numbers on a piece of paper, which have no meaning. And the people that we work with want to know that we have an understanding of who they are, how they work, does their product or service have some potential in the marketplace, what will make it more successful, and they got to know that I'm familiar with it.
I want to move to another client, if you will, not one of your clients directly, but the little guy. It's the mom and pop organization, the cinematographers, the actors, the people that are the nuts and bolts of the industry, of the media industry, that keep it humming. Maybe they're not the drivers and necessarily the CEOs, but they need the same kind of information that you're passing out on your newsletter, in your Twitter feeds, and in your blogs. And that's kind of why I appreciate your communications, because you give us the insights that the little guy needs. Even though we're not playing at that level, we need to know where the industry is going, because it's our industry. It does affect our livelihood.
Well, I think if more of those people broadly, and the types of people you're referring to, paid a bit more attention to some of what's going on, they would be better off in what they do. But you know, there's a human nature to that. There's a left side, right side of the brain. There are people who, and actually with many of those people, it's never a question of intelligence, or rarely a question of intelligence, because some of them have skills that are superior to mine, superior in what they do as a craft or a service than, let's say, what I do. But a good business at the end needs a blend of creativity, in the areas that you work and we work, creativity, technology, but it better have a business focus too. And all three of those components need to be in harmony. It won't necessarily be equal as in an equilateral triangle, but if one side, any one of those sides is too far off, is either too big, which means another side is too little, then it's out of whack. It's got to be in harmony.
And I think that's why I appreciate your communications, particularly on Roundtable, because the people I'm talking about, the individual practitioners, I call them the nuts and bolts of the industry, they're working very close to getting a job done. And they do lose sight of the industry, the overall trends of the industry. And that's what I think they need to keep sight of to keep that triangle balanced.
Well, you've read a lot of the things that I post on Roundtable and other places, and I try to do that, maybe not in 140 characters, sometimes that, but enough of a sentence or two or three and not paragraphs very often, because let people read that, let people read in sound bites. People read the way newspapers are put together. If you pick up a newspaper, and I don't mean necessarily the paper, although I am notwithstanding everything I read digitally, I am a paid print subscriber, a long-time paid print subscriber of the LA Times. Paragraphs are small, because that's how people read and absorb what they're doing. And so the things that I post are like that. Occasionally I will put a link to the full article, because I think maybe they want to see the whole thing. But for most people, that 30,000-foot level type of comment that I'll make is sufficient. And actually the good news for me is that there are times when I do that, people will ping me. They won't just put a comment in the on Roundtable or other places. They'll send me an email, they'll phone me and say, hey, I saw that you were at the SMPTE event a couple of weeks ago. What did you learn there? How does that help me in my business? What should we be thinking about? Can we retain your services? So it's that high level just it's a seed to plant in people's minds.
So as a consultant, you obviously have a lot of confidentiality with your clients' information. I know that you don't always want to tell people who your clients are, but you've worked for a lot of big companies, a lot of not necessarily big, but important companies that are really making a mark in media, and I think specifically of Lucasfilm.
Well, that was one of the companies I've worked with earlier in my career. In fact, Star Wars is in my blood. Way back, I was with the Coopers of PricewaterhouseCoopers, started in the Boston office, transferred to Los Angeles, and then along the way, I got a call from a headhunter who said, hey, there's a company on the west side of town looking for somebody that's either an MBA or a CPA. You've got both. Are you interested? And I really wasn't. I figured I'd spend another year with the firm. But I said, you know what, I'm on jury duty next week. I'll take the interview. I can get out for the interview. Lo and behold, what had occurred, and this goes back to the late 70s, Lucasfilm had hired somebody from 20th Century Fox to be their CFO. The chain of events that occurred because of that movement left an opening in the organization, and I got hired for that opening. So it was a direct connection to Lucasfilm and Star Wars. And I spent several years at Fox tracking and reporting profitability of the film slate. I had a responsibility for the department that tracked box office, merchandise accounting, and a few other areas in which I got involved. And then later on, studio operations. How does a studio work? How do we rent these stages that we have? How does the sound department work? What about the sound effects and editorial? How do they all tie into the process? Spent a short time at MGM along the way, and then I went back to Coopers and Lybrand 8.5 years after I left them the first time in the entertainment practice in a quasi-consulting and audit role. Audit because they said, you're a CPA, we want you looking at the numbers of our clients. Sure. Consulting because that's what I wanted to do, because I'd previously been brought into a company by legal counsel where they had some problems, and I knew where given an opportunity, I could figure out what the problems were, how they manifested themselves within the organization, and what the company needed to do to get out of those problems. So I figured the consulting side. So I had a range of different clients in the entertainment practices, from studios to small TV production companies to the guy who created the Gong Show. And along the way, got wind of the fact that Lucasfilm was looking for new auditors, won us an opportunity to compete, and we competed against 3 of the other, what was then known as the Big 8. We won. I got involved in a big, so there's link number 2 to Star Wars in my life, because we were picked at a meeting that was held at Skywalker Ranch. This goes back to June 20th, 1988. And got involved in a consulting study to help Industrial Light and Magic, a company that at the time had won 7 Academy Awards, 4 Technical Achievement Awards, but needed to get its business act together. Great work, great talent, smart people, very, very capable people. But if the company had been owned by basically anybody other than George Lucas, they probably would have been out of business. We've seen a lot of companies go out because they're not financed correctly. Good work, good product, but they got to have the right financing. I had the good fortune after that study to be recruited out of Coopers to be part of the first professional management team at ILM to help them grow up and implement some of those recommendations that I was involved in. From there, I helped Kodak start a visual effects company in a marketing role. Interesting role for a guy with a CPA, but I knew the technology, I knew the studio system, and as they said to me, you don't look at your shoes when you talk to somebody. So they wanted somebody in a marketing role that could do that. But that was when digital technology was getting started, and in the people and companies that I was talking to, I saw they had some of those same challenges that ILM had. Good at what they did, but needed help on the business side. I knew a lot of them would not be able to afford or would be intimidated by a PricewaterhouseCoopers, a McKinsey and Company, but they might be able to afford me. So I took a leap of faith and started doing that. And it's actually worked okay. My wife had taken time off from her career to be with our kids, and that was one of the smartest decisions we've ever made. Okay, so we did that. So it was a natural for her to get involved. Notwithstanding her MBA, her undergraduate degree was in English. So I'd say, read this letter, read this report. If I send it to John and there's a mistake in her, he's going to have my you-know-what. So that worked out. She could critique it and challenge it, and while my work was good, our work was better. And so at this point, over 20 years, because of the types of companies I've worked for, the range of clients that I had at a Coopers and Lybrand, the types of jobs that I had at Fox and at Lucasfilm, we've covered those areas of the value chain as I was describing earlier to you. So when I come to a Digital Hollywood or I go to an SMPTE event as I did last week, and I meet somebody and they say, you know, can you help me on this, that, or the other thing? Have you done anything in this area before? Sometimes we have, sometimes we haven't. But we know we have a base of knowledge where we can help them figure it out. And there are times when we say, you know, I don't think you're going to be happy. I don't think we're going to be able to give you not the level of service, because we will be service focused. We're not going to be able to give you the kind of advice that you really need at this point in your business. So while I like that paycheck as much as anybody else, I'm not that hungry that I want to do something where the client's not going to be happy.
So we're at Digital Media Conference,
Yeah.
Digital Hollywood. Digital is the technology. It's changed everything. Has the business of Hollywood, the business of media, changed over the years?
Well, the answer is yes, because you've got a wider range of outlets for your product. If you're making a movie, for example, when I look back to having started at Fox in the late 70s, there were 17,000 screens in North America. Today there are 40,000 or thereabouts. Home video was just getting started. It had only been about 10, 15 years earlier, maybe 20 years earlier, that TV became a factor. The studios, as you know, went from initially making movies, but for TV, they did old vaudeville stuff on TV. They might have recorded a Broadway play and put that out. So the whole content transformation was going on, even with the way film, even it was still being used, film. As home entertainment came to be, and the VHS tape and the Betamax tape came to be, that meant another outlet for that content that wasn't there before, in addition to still selling it on TV. Now you've got all sorts of different ways to get that message out there. You've got the streamings, you got still the theatrical side of it, and we'll talk about this at my Future of Film panel later on today, but you still have the theatrical experience, although that's mostly digital. You know, there are a few people like Christopher Nolan and Quentin Tarantino and maybe one or two others that can demand that the studio put their film out, their movie out on film. Let me get the words correct.
That stuff with sprocket holes.
The stuff with sprocket, yes. And get that movie out there. But now you've got all these other windows. You've got lots of opportunities, a lot of revenue opportunities, but with that there are challenges too to get that product out there.
Yeah, and this morning you were talking about 4K and 5G and a whole lot of other distribution possibilities. So does that change anything for the little guy? Where is the future? What do we practitioners, individual practitioners, need to look at for the future?
Well, from the 4K point of view, I think the practitioners are already taking advantage of that. Putting on that old Kodak hat of mine from 20 plus years ago, Kodak said if you took a frame of film and you used their film scanner, you would have 4,096 pixels across, effectively 4K. So, you know, Kodak set the standard on that, and that is still the standard. So for years, the movies were shot on film. When they were edited digitally, they were brought down to 1K or 2K, and the movies went out at 2K when they went back to film because 4K projectors just weren't there.
Right.
Now you've got 4K and laser projection in a lot of theaters. 4K TV is coming about. Content for the little guy, the content creators are continuing to shoot or originate their product on 4K, and in some cases, with some of the RED cameras, and I think some of the ARRI cameras and a couple of others, are capable of 6K,
Yep.
and there's a couple of Sony cameras that enable 8K, and while I think 8K has been shown for broadcast at the NEC booth at CES and in Japan, which is where HD started to begin with, I think it's going to be quite some time before it really ever gets to the home. 4K is only this far into the home right now. So
The future is wide open. The future is unlimited, as we've heard this morning, and we'll hear later today. The one thing we can count on is change.
Well, I think there's people that are always going to be out there pushing the envelope. You've got to have entrepreneurs. Those are the people along the fringe of the trade shows who push the envelope, who have a good idea, get their product to market. Eventually, those companies are partly acquired by one of the big companies to take them to the next level. You know, a big company can't necessarily have that, can't be fleet of foot, if you will, to create new technologies. They're better off buying it, even if the purchase price is more than they might have put into it.
And as we heard this morning in your panel, content will remain king.
Sure, that's why we sit down in front of that big display sometimes.
Good. Well, Marty, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
I really appreciate it. And on behalf of all the folks at Roundtable, thank you for contributing and making it really interesting.
Well, thank you very much. Pleased to be here. Thank you, Jim.
Good. We'll see you this afternoon.
Okay.